Okay.
All right, this is the June 20th meeting of the Flood and Erosion Control Board. We do have a quorum. Present is Becky Bunnell, Chair.
John Lamberti, Vice Chair.
Dick Mahusky, I'm Secretary.
Paul Andino, member.
And is there anybody on the phone?
Wiswell.
Peter Wiswell. Terrific. Is Prue on?
No, Prue is not on.
Prue is not on. Okay. So we will go ahead and do our first agenda item, which is to consider and act upon the minutes of May 2023 meeting. Did everyone get a chance to read them, and does anyone have any comments and or suggested edits?
I have one. This is Dick Mahusky. I have one comment on way at the end on the second page. The last bullet point before item 6 says Peter Wiswell started a conversation regarding oyster fields and their purpose for protecting the shoreline. I suggest changing the word fields to castles. So it reads regarding oyster castles and their purpose for protecting.
Is there a difference?
Yeah, no. Castles are actually, it's
oyster fields are where they're out there and you go pick them.
It's a concrete block system that you can purchase, and you actually make it into artificial reefs and breakwaters, and the oysters then grow on it. And it's done a lot in the south and then in sort of the Texas coast.
Okay.
They use it a lot, and it's actually something we need to think about for our area because I think it would work really well.
Okay.
Any other comments on the minutes? Then can I get a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. We have a second. All in favor say
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes as amended are so approved. The next agenda item is a discussion on the evolving plans for Penfield Pavilion. So let me give you a quick update of where we stand. The pavilion itself is proceeding per the town plan. The architects are working on designing ramps and other kinds of things. And I believe Race has completed the structural engineering piece and the modeling. So we have now moving, they're going then to go ahead and do the actual engineering drawings, the formal engineering drawings, which then have to be submitted and I believe approved by DEEP. And a parallel path to that, the Flood and Erosion Control Board has requested that we start the Penfield Resilience Study, which, as you know, was funded by the Board of Finance for $100,000 as a separate line item, as opposed to being incorporated into the budget total. And a RFP amendment, I don't know if it's even an RFP, an amendment to RACE has been submitted, requesting that they re-look at the 2015 plans that they had done and submitted to the building committee. I wrote back and said that is actually only part A of what the Flood and Erosion Control Board requested as part of the total project. We had requested 2 other pieces. We had requested that there was, once they did a series of additional designs, that we have an informal meeting with DEEP and FEMA, which was not in the proposal that they put out to RACE, and that also then that they take the best 2 or 3 most likely to be permitted designs and take them one step further in design such that we could do a pre-permitting, if you will, design analysis. So design would be at least 30 to 40% done and preliminary costings. So we could then determine which of these we would want to pursue. So I've requested that those 2 pieces be added to the proposal. The town has confirmed that Flood and Erosion Control Board will be invited to the discussion. They are not going to formally request those 2 things be added, but we will have a chance to request them in the discussion when RACE comes back with their preliminary proposal.
That's good.
Which is not ideal because now RACE won't have costed those 2 things out, so now we'll have to get another costing. So it just elongates the process.
Is DEEP willing to speed up the process of approval, or?
Yeah, so I talked to 2 different people from DEEP over the past month. I talked to Diane Ikvik, who is actually based, she's basically DEEP/FEMA. And she says, we do these informal reviews all the time. We're very willing, and she's willing to help me set it up. And then I ran into another woman up at DEEP, whose card I happen to have kept.
Were you up there trolling the halls?
I'm lining us up here.
That's good.
Marcy Ballant
Okay, so Marcy's the one who
She's an environmental
Commu-
analyst of the Land and Water Resources Division.
she's the one that communicated with us
Yes,
after
the Fenwick.
Dunes and
The Dunes one, exactly. So she is very happy, again, to help us coordinate a meeting. So I think it'll be very easy for us to get a meeting. They're very happy to review these plans and give us their opinions, which is what we want. We want to know, how likely are you to permit these ideas?
I was thinking more, they want to get the construction going in September down there. You have to get permission before September then, right?
Well, no, I think these could be separate from the construction, because we're talking about, the kinds of things we'd be looking at are, could we put a frontal dune in front? And if so, could we have a geotube or not? And, if so, could it be planted? Could it, or could we do a wall in the back, or a partially raised roadway with maybe a smaller wall? Or could a wall be sort of back behind the parking area? So we're going to come up with a series of amended designs. When I looked at all the race designs, there were 6 of them that were submitted in 2015. I would say that probably 4 or 5 have no chance of being permitted at all. But I think the other ones could be amended, and possibly some additional ones could be put forward. So I think there's definitely some things we can be putting in front of DEEP and FEMA, and I think that they would be presumably well received if we, didn't have a hard flood control structure in the front of the building. That will not be
away from the building and not in front of the building.
It's the front of the building is where their issue is. So even a reinforced dune in front of the building could be problematic.
Right.
So raising the road might be acceptable.
Yes.
Because the road, the whole sidewalk in front of Penfield,
Right.
that's in an AE zone. Okay. So it's out of the VE zone, and it's landward of the
the Linwa, right?
Limit of
wave action.
Linwa. Limit of moderate wave action.
Yeah.
So it's landward of the limit of moderate wave action. So it becomes merely a flood wall, not a seawall, because it would not be impacted by the waves.
I mean, my personal preference would be to raise the whole road from the beach club all the way down
The beach.
2 feet, at least 2 feet.
All the way down to.
I don't know if we could do it all the way to Reef, because then you get into so many driveways, but we could definitely do it to Rickard, to Penfield, and to Durrell.
Okay.
I mean, you still have driveways to Penwood.
But not that many, and if you raise it only 2 feet, your slope from going 2 feet is like that, whereas your slope of going 4 feet, you can't.
Yeah.
And this is where Race has to come and do the analysis. Can you get into a driveway with if you have a 2-foot raised roadway, then you only need a 4-foot wall, and you could make that look really good with stones.
So the question is, does raising the road 2 feet have a protective impact equal or greater than the present condition, which has been eliminated?
Which is, it basically equals the present condition.
That as long as
because we in essence are lowering the beach grade by roughly 2 feet.
So you make it up on the street grade.
Yeah.
But the point about elevating the road 2 feet is that you then put a 4-foot wall on top of that. So you have a 6-foot road elevated.
A 2-foot wall with a 4-foot.
So the 2-foot wall.
A 2-foot
elevation with a 4-foot wall.
And a 4-foot wall. So you get 6 feet.
Your 6-foot roadway gets up to 8 with the elevated roadway, and then gets up to 12 with only a 4-foot wall.
Okay.
And a 4-foot wall, the issue with a 6-foot wall is it's the height of a person, and it looks ugly, and it's like, but a 4-foot wall is just like a
little retaining wall.
So it's not, and you'd make it nice stones. And anyway, so that's that's my personal preference, but I'm very open to see what Race comes back with.
Okay, make the neighbors.
Yeah, Becky?
Yeah.
Just so I understand what you're describing, raise the road 2 feet.
Yeah.
And then on the north side of the road, there is, in addition, a 4-foot wall?
Yes, and then you'd have to have some kind of closure to the parking lot entrance to Penfield. And you can do closures a couple different ways. I mean, and I'm sure Race will propose alternate closures for us.
So if before you mentioned the wall, I was thinking to myself, gee, homeowners should be saying thank you very much. But
that's what I would hope.
But from the north side, homeowners front
when
yard,
you say north side, do beach side and town side, because I'm not sure I understand.
Town side. I'm sorry, town side. Yes.
So I would envision this on the beach side. The wall would be on the beach side, is what I'd envision, and it would tie into Rickards Beach and Durrell, and you would just need an opening to enter into the Penfield parking lot.
So the people on the town side, it's really not that big a deal. And
it would be a minor slope into their driveway. Their driveway would now have a little slope down.
Would it be a pool or creating a little pond or something when the road is raised up?
You need a drainage condition.
We'd have to do some sort of, Race would have to consider drainage and figure that out.
Okay.
And on the beach side, the people are looking at a 6-foot wall.
4-foot wall.
A 4-foot wall.
But a 2-foot.
6 foot. I'm saying in elevate, you've got 2-foot road, 4-foot wall, so they're looking at a 6-foot differential.
I could envision a gradual slope up to 2 feet, and so there'd be, I think my view might suggest it's a 4-foot wall, not a 6-foot wall,
yes.
Because the 2 feet can be gradually graded to the wall.
Well,
and I think there are going to be 5 openings on the beach side. There'll be an opening into the beach club itself. And the beach club currently has a couple openings, but we would ask them to figure out a way to access the other part of the opening through their main opening. They certainly have the geography for that. There are 3 homes between the beach club and Penfield, so those would have to have some sort of gate-like thing for those driveways, and then there's the Penfield opening. So there's 5 openings that would have to be considered as part of it. Anyway, it's not our job to solve this today, in my mind. This is something we would ask Race to come up with and to look at these kinds of issues. But I think, Peter, what you bring up is if we have things we want Race to make sure they look at as part of these issues, or if anyone on the Flood and Erosion Control Board has an alternate approach they would like Race to look at, what I'd like to do is gather all of those before we meet with Race so that we can give them a complete list of suggested options we would like them to evaluate as part of this process. So my request is, could everyone think about what you'd like to see and feed it in via email?
Okay. Becky, one observation for consideration. In years past, I was involved with building levees in South Louisiana, and I found that it became a major point of litigation determining whether you were inside the levee or outside the levee. And effectively, we're talking about building a levee, and I'm not an engineer, but I remember all sorts of data was put in front of us, evidencing how if you were on the outside of the levee, the impact from the storm would be far more severe. That's not fair. And I have to dig up my old notes, but that became a big point in litigation. How can you shortchange one for the benefit of others? Or an engineer might say that's just not the case here. Just an observation.
And I think that, so could you put that down as a consideration for Race to consider, whether these 3 houses and the beach club, which would be the only 4 properties outside of this raised road, would be adversely impacted, and to what degree?
Absolutely.
Okay. So that's my update on Penfield Pavilion. I don't know if anyone else has any other further questions or updates.
No, I don't.
The next item is status items on the project list, which Bill gave us a quick update. Do you have his comments in front of you?
Yes.
Do you want to just read those out?
Sure. And I think I sent this around.
You did.
To everyone. All right, so Becky asked to meet with Bill, and she gave him all the topical sentences, and he didn't have time to meet, but he wrote his replies here before he went off on vacation this week. I'll just read it right through. Any update on sunny day flooding on Fairfield Beach Road? And are you talking about adding catch basins, raising road? Town has hired Race to inspect all tide gates in the town and will repair if applicable. What prompted this was I saw Neil Jane out on Fairfield Beach Road walking down the road with his GIS mapping instrument on his shoulder, and I wondered whether Bill had issued an order to start taking the topographical survey of Fairfield Beach Road
Again.
in preparation of raising Fairfield Beach Road.
But it sounds like he hasn't. What he's talking about is a separate project that Tim Bishop has commissioned Race to do, which
Right.
is looking at all of the tide gates. And that is a project that Race has been awarded the job on and is obviously looking at all the flapper gates and all the gates along Fairfield Beach Road as part of that.
Yeah. Any update on the Pine Creek dredging project? And this is the one where the residents, it's been like 2 years now, the residents want to dredge the lower end of Pine Creek so they can get their boats in and out at mid to low tides.
Right.
DEEP will, and this is Bill's response, DEEP will allow a certificate of performance by following previous certificate of performance permit. Problem may arise from existing conditions varying from the ones during Sandy. The town is sending out an RFP for a bathymetric survey. Workload caused delay, but is going out next week, maybe today if possible. So that's the missing piece. DEEP apparently wants to see a current bathymetric survey of the Lower Creek area. ARPA, okay, next item, ARPA, Perry's Green, next steps. Are we still awaiting DEEP permits? Answer, DEEP approved the certificate of performance, still need Army Corps of Engineers and our own planning and zoning coastal area management permit. Question 2, ARPA, Rooster River progress waiting on easements and Bridgeport study. What is the Bridgeport study? Answer, Bridgeport interviewing consulting engineers and invited town to participate. We'll get further details. Number 3, GZA next steps. Do we want to go back to GZA and ask them to suggest solutions? You mentioned the only way we can get positive cost benefit is to do the entire coast, but are there temporary structures that could protect these areas that might cost less than permanent? And could we ask GZA to suggest where these might go? Bill's answer, still reviewing a report, then we'll ask. Fairfield Beach Club, I believe Eli was going to set up a meeting with FEC and all of us to discuss the concept. Do we have a date for that yet? Answer, town has asked Race to submit proposal regarding Penfield and surrounding areas, including the Fairfield Beach Club. When received, we will review and set up a meeting with Race, Fairfield Beach Club, town, and invite FECB to the meeting. Number 5, Penfield Pavilion study. Eli sent us something on this, but no date yet for the briefing, and Bill has no further updates. Number 6, ARPA funds for the high-intensity wave project. Becky's comment, I believe Mega said she would have a draft for FECB to review prior to submitting to purchasing. She had said April timing. Are we still on track for this May? You mentioned that the town is still deciding on entire FRP or just concepts. I think we need a meeting with FECB and whoever is leading the move to just do concepts, as the FECB strongly feels that you first need to do some level of modeling in order to evaluate concepts and to show DEEP that some of the concept ideas would not work on our shoreline. Bill's answer, department is working on complete RFP. Number 7, ARPA funds, downtown green infrastructure update, and Bill's answer, hope to determine in July. We have total recommendations which exceed by a lot the amount reserved. Plan of action for using ARPA money, July. Number 8, Tidegate. I think we're up to speed on this, but until the study comes back, and just Bill's comment, Race is working on it. Number 9, Circa project on railroad underpasses, update, no updates yet. Engineered beaches, next step for confirming Penfield profile grade and getting deep approval. Schedule for maintaining the grade on 4 currently approved profiles. Do we have a firm schedule for this yet? Can't submit on Penfield until FEMA Deep EPA removes the notice of violation. Question about stockpiling sand for temporary beach dune hardening ahead of a big storm, and Bill did not have any response to that. And this was the one that came up during the review of Penfield, where there is a permanent allowance to stockpile sand on a beach when a storm is forecast for the area.
And you can move that into a dune in front of
Right,
the
you can
building.
then make a little dune.
As a temporary dune, and then move it back into your stockpile.
Right. Question 12, Southport Harbor, an opportunity to use some of the good sand for our beaches. Becky spoke briefly to someone from Shellfish Commission about this, and Bill's response, question mark, still requires deep approval, and according to webinar, sand would erode easily if not stabilized and not recommended. Dick can confirm. He's referring to the webinar on dunes in Connecticut that was just held on, I believe, the 14th of June. And Bill was on that call, and I was on that call. And they talked about dunes, and subsequent to that, I had an email back and forth with Marcy Balin, who Becky has spoken to in person. You saw her in person up there. So, the topic of dunes and geotubes as flood mitigation items is a topic. It had no legs, it has no arms yet, but it is a topic. So that was the extent of Bill's comments on projects.
Okay.
So I guess the good news is that it sounds like the high-intensity wave study is back on track, which I was very nervous about, because if we do it the way the University of Rhode Island had recommended, you have to do a whole sort of state of the coastline analysis first, to then do your modeling, to then do your concepts and model against them. And that takes, 2 or 3, they want to do it sort of in spring and they want to do it in fall. So, the fact that it's taken a year and a half to get an RFP out is incredibly frustrating, because we are running out of time.
Yeah.
And at some point we will run out of time to the effect that we won't be able to do the project correctly, and we will either have to give up the funds or we will have to do a substandard version of the project, which is incredibly frustrating.
It is.
And I just feel like we have put this on every monthly call. We ask for progress, and we keep saying we are short-staffed. So I think at some point we need to go to Brenda and say, you either don't have the resources or you're deliberately slow-walking this so that you're not going to be able to do the project correctly. What is it? Because it's one or the other. And if you don't have the resources, then what can we do to help you get resources? And if you're slow-walking it, why are you slow-walking it? And I'm not sure who's doing the slow-walking or the resourcing, but whatever it is, it's not getting done. So I think if this sounds like finally he says an RFP is in progress, even though he's been saying that every month for the past 8 months. But if we don't get one in July, then honestly, I think I have to sit down with Brenda and Tom.
Yeah.
I don't see any way around that. So that's the project list as it stands. Any questions? Okay, the next agenda item was discuss the letter to the town boards regarding the remit. We actually discussed that 2 meetings ago, I believe, and I've kind of got it in a holding pattern as opposed to bringing it forward, because, Peter, you had said that your interpretation of the language in the revised approved bill was that by saying that we adopt 2084. Wait, no, what's the number? that we adopt of the state statute of something 84 inclusive, that means that we actually adopt the 85 through 94, which, if that's true, we then have the full remit of the state statute. But I think you could interpret it slightly differently, that if we adopt 84 only, which is what our town charter says, it's not necessarily saying that we adopt 85 through 94. So I've sort of, my feeling is let's just hold on this for a little bit, unless you guys feel we really need to
No,
push it.
That's fine.
I think it's fine.
Okay. Next agenda
Maybe
item.
we'll start another charter revision right after the election.
That's what I'm sort of wondering, so that either Brenda will start it or the new person, whoever is the first select person, will start a charter revision, and we'll put this back in again, and it will get through, I'm sure. All right, Peter, the next one is any new information regarding adding tees to our existing groins? I know you've been doing some good work on that. Is there anything you want to update the group on that?
Becky, I'm not sure what I left you with, so I might be repetitious here. The works with the outfit that I referenced. They do, it looks like they do primarily work outside the United States, but they have been involved in that big project on Staten Island that we hear so much about, but not relative. It didn't look to me like it was relative to the T's, but another related project. I have asked that they get back to me relative to any projects they're doing in the Northeast that involve placement of tees at the end of groins. I have not heard back. The other point, I believe I told you that they gave me a preliminary estimate of $1.5 million per acre. I think per acre. And I went back and said, okay, fine. Is that the actual footprint of the groin plus the prospective tee? Is there a 100-foot, 50-foot buffer that goes around it? I don't have that number yet. I've followed up on it, but I have to believe that it's more than just the footprint, the physical footprint of the groin plus T. So I don't think we could say, oh, gee, each groin is a quarter acre, so we can do the whole project for $5 million. I have to believe there's a surrounding area that's going to raise the cost, but I still have to get an answer.
Okay. So I think that's awesome, Peter. If you could keep trying to follow up with them on it, because I guess my question would be, was it a cubic acre? Because there's obviously some depth to this.
Did you see this?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's obviously some depth to this. It's not just, it's just not, it's not a plane. It's a cube, because there'll be presumably 6 feet. I'm assuming our current groins, I would say my best estimate is they're probably 4 to 5 feet high at the end.
And then you gotta figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I hadn't thought of it that way.
So I mean, what we're really...
I have proceeded on the basis that it was linear, not cube.
Well, it is linear, but it's gonna have a depth to it. So let's say that the groins themselves are probably 5 feet wide, I'm gonna guess, 5 to 6 feet wide. Mm-hmm. And at the end, and the sea side at low tide, they're probably 4 to 5.
At low tide, they're 10 feet wide. I'd say at low tide, they're at least, at low tide, I'd say they're at least 10 feet wide.
Runs like this, the deeper it is, the bigger it gets.
Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Okay, so we would need then presumably 10 feet wide for the tee, and probably 5 to 6 feet of depth.
I think. I'm trying to find out.
But anyway, if
But
you
that makes sense.
if you could get, even, obviously they're not going to give us firm numbers, but if they could even just give us the ballparks, I think that would be really helpful for us to just understand what magnitude of cost we're talking about here. And
They're saying $1 million an acre.
1.5
Million and a half.
million and a half.
Now, Peter,
If you figure cubic, we're roughly looking at about $250,000 per groin.
Right, which is really reasonable. I think that's reasonable.
I mean, the only question in my mind is where does that depth, because there's probably 12 of them.
so Peter,
Yeah.
the outfit that you're talking with, is that the outfit that you gave us the name of, which is based in Israel, that's doing the Staten Island project? Or is it some other entity you've been speaking with coming up with $1.5 million per acre?
There is an intermediary by the name of Ramboll, Ramboll. They are a Danish-based global engineering firm who have a substantial presence in the United States, and they sourced the actual contractor and told me that their contracts are usually done through the Corps of Engineers. And obviously this Ramboll outfit would love to be the ones to get the job, but I've told them, right now we're not paying you anything, and we're looking for some free information that may produce nothing, and so that's probably why they're being a little bit slow. But
are they talking, because my sense in looking at the website of that outfit that's based in Israel is that they do cast concrete items and then put them in the water, as opposed to just taking stone and dumping stone, the typical way I am familiar with to make a break wall. So is it
Dick,
stone
that's an excellent.
about?
I'm sorry?
Is it stone that you're talking about, or the cast concrete elements?
No, Dick, that's an excellent question. I did not ask. It'd be interesting to know. I guess I naively had it in my mind it would be more stone, but from a practical standpoint, I think it makes a lot more sense for it to be cast concrete. Less labor, less equipment, less time, but I'll find out.
But if we're going to go the cast concrete route, then I would suggest, I was talking to the company that makes these oyster castles, and these oyster castles are concrete. Think of them as almost Lego blocks that you can make into a T groin.
Or jacks.
And
kids' jacks.
And the beauty of it is you can build it, easily 6 feet high and 10 feet wide if you needed to. And
that's the base. That becomes the base.
That becomes,
the oysters grow on the top of that.
They grow along the side of it down.
Right.
And what that does is it turns it into a living shoreline gray-green structure, because now you're providing a home for fish and oysters, and not just providing a hardened flood wall. So I think if you are going to go back to them, ask them whether they have any kind of gray-green option to do these. I will go back to the oyster castle people and see. I actually have a cost on the oyster castles, how much those cost, and I could probably get the dimensions that we would think for a T groin. I don't know if we, 50 feet wide, let's call it, and 50 feet long, 10 feet wide, going up to maybe 4 feet at the top. A pyramid, cut-off pyramid.
Becky, you raise a really interesting point. As we all know from walking along the beach at low tide, over the past several years, the number of oysters on the groins has increased enormously. And so
Right.
if those tees are put in, that gives even more habitat for oysters, which should make deep and others happy.
Exactly. It turns it into a gray-green hybrid structure, which is the only thing we will ever get permitted in our state. So if you could ask your sources what they would propose in that gray-green world, and I will go back and see if I can get an Oyster Castle cost, because I do have a per block cost, so that should be a fairly easy thing to calculate.
Hey, Becky, if I can ask, the Lego analogy, are you suggesting that perhaps the Lego type stuff the Israeli company put on Staten Island might also be susceptible to being reconfigured to create the T? I just didn't drill down.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting.
Wow. That's why it's so cheap.
Yep.
Good point. Okay.
Well, thank you for that work, and let's keep this project going on ourselves, because I think there's something here, and then we'll have to figure out a way to, once we get a firmer handle on cost, to determine if this is something that the neighborhood wants to bond and take on. And this is where the modeling for high-intensity waves would come in, because wouldn't it be nice to know how much sand would get accreted and what that would do to take the energy out of the waves, by the way. This is actually one of the suggestions. This is actually one of the options that we were going to look at for high-intensity waves and do the modeling on, which would be a big piece to be able to take to deep, saying this is what it would do to take the energy out of the waves.
Yeah. Good.
Becky,
All right.
your oyster contacts, are they able to corroborate my comment that there are more oysters on the groins?
No, the people I'm talking to are the people who build these cast concrete, what I'll call them Lego block oyster castles. They're basically, they fit into each other and can be made into, I was looking at it for intermittent break walls and T's for the groins as two of the options for the high intensity waves.
Okay. I was just curious if we could get some expert to say, of course there are more oysters on the groin now. You need to have a groin every 10 feet, and we'll bring back the oyster population in Long Island Sound to a level it was 200 years ago.
Well, here's actually, let me actually add a slight side note to this whole conversation, which I'm curious to see where they're going to come out, but there have been some surveyors on the beach recently. They notified Emmeline and they notified Flood and Erosion Control Board that they are, and I believe this is being done by DEEP, they are looking at sources of erosion along the Connecticut coastline. And I know that there is a firm belief that groins are bad among DEEP, and I'm nervous that they're going to say, take the groins out, much less put T's on. But that to me would be all about adding erosion. They're trying to say, where are the erosion risks? This was, Emmeline had sent us, were you not copied on
No,
that?
this is a new topic to me.
Oh, okay.
I'm making myself a note to call her and see what she knows.
Let me actually pull up
Because
her email.
when we talk about groins and sandcastles, I keep coming back. If you go on Google Earth and you go along the Italian coast on the Adriatic Sea, and you go along the coast of Israel, and you go along the coast of Spain, you will see that many of those cities have offshore intermittent offshore breakwaters. Mm-hmm. And it creates scalloped beach behind those intermittent breakwaters.
That one in West Haven.
Okay.
Which has been preserved for 100 years.
There you go. And I mean,
and they're doing it down in Florida?
They're done in Florida. Stanford has one in the front of Stanford Harbor where there are breakwaters on both sides entering the harbor that are enormous. And they preserve the structure.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is it accretes the sand behind the breakwall and extends the beach.
Yes.
So
exactly.
Extend the beach, more run-up length for the wave energy to dissipate as it runs up the beach.
We're all in agreement.
What's the matter with that?
But the feeling is...
VEEP.
It's
the best money we could spend.
So this is, Brian Caulfield is leading this, and this is a FEMA Region 1 Coastal Erosion Hazard Area Study, Field Recon. To whom it may concern, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA's Technical Mapping Advisory Council has been tasked with considering future conditions. They recommended that FEMA assess the impact of coastal erosion and sea level rise. In response to this recommendation, the FEMA Region 1 initiated a coastal erosion and sea level rise studies in Fairfield, Middlesex, and New Haven counties. The result of these studies will be used to develop non-regulatory coastal erosion hazard maps, which will identify coastal areas subject to erosion. Compass is currently serving FEMA as a production and technical services contractor in executing these coastal erosion studies. The purpose of this letter is to inform you of Compass's reconnaissance activities, which will include a visual inspection of the shoreline to identify unique physical characteristics impacting coastal erosion. The reconnaissance will be completed on foot by teams of 2 to 4 people. The field staff may be using handheld GPS devices and digital cameras to document the findings of the field reconnaissance activities. Compass plans to conduct the field activities the week of June 5th. So they've done this. If you have questions regarding this activity, please contact me. So I think this is something that we need to understand and be aware of.
Yeah, because they're gonna say, oh, your groins are subjecting your coastline to erosion.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be.
That will be.
It'll be very interesting to read. I'll just leave it at that.
But I think we need to maybe actually.
Academic before it's.
Well, we might actually want to weigh in and show. Does anyone have the pictures of before the groins went in? There was no sand on the beaches.
Right.
We must have. I have visuals of.
They have to be here. They have to be here archived.
We should send those in as part of their analysis, because they're going to assume, because what everyone says is, oh, well, the groins are great for one side, but then the other side loses beach.
Yeah, but when the winds change and the water changes,
well,
isn't
they
self-regulate.
Well, and the beach is still bigger on both sides.
That's right.
Even if it's a little less on this, it's still bigger than it was before.
Somewhere Connecticut has to have archived the aerial flyovers that they do once a year or once every 2 years. So you can, if you find that cache.
I would want to read Compass's report.
Yeah, no.
I'd actually rather
send before groins and after
they write the
groins.
report.
Okay.
Because once they've written the report,
it's kind of too late.
You can't unwrite it, and everyone will say groins are terrible. Groins are terrible, and in reality, groins have accreted massive amounts of sand.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Where if you had the aerials to compare pre-groin years with post-groin years, you could
presumably they will. You would hope that they would do that analysis, but in case they don't, perhaps we should provide that. Is there anyone on this board that would like to take the lead in researching that?
I just wouldn't know where to
Becky?
start.
Yeah?
What I will do is look in my records, and I believe I have a report that goes back to, let's say, the 70s or the 80s, that might include some old photographs, but it discusses let me see if I can find it, and if I can, I'll scan it and send it.
That would be great. And I also have some pictures from my neighbor of pre-groin, what the beach conditions were pre-groin, that I think I would send in.
When did the groins go up?
Yes.
In the 60s.
It was in the
60s.
I'm pretty sure it was in the 60s.
And who paid for it?
I think it was
Army
60s.
Corps paid a third, the town paid a third, and residents paid a third by bonding. That's my understanding. It was done at the same time as the Pine Creek Dike seawall, which was the same.
Peter, you were a resident back then.
Was that the 80s?
Do you and your family have pictures
The 80s.
from that?
It was after I moved in.
I might be wrong in the 60s. I was told the 60s, but Donna's saying that he thinks the Pine Creek was done in the 80s. But maybe the groins were done in the 60s and the Pine Creek was done in the 80s.
I was around in the 80s, but I wasn't around in the 60s. But
Well,
Peter,
Becky?
Yeah.
Hey, Becky, I can tell you that I remember as a kid stepping out in front of 3 or 4 different properties my family had along the beach, and there was a bulkhead in front of the house.
You go down,
and
you
we
have to go down
had
steps.
At every one of them, we had steps that you had to go down, and there's no trace of that bulkhead anymore. And it's not because it washed away; it's because of all the sand that came in. I'm absolutely.
If you can find any of those pictures, I think those are worth sending in. I'm almost positive that my neighbor has a picture of that. So I'm going to track down one of those pictures.
So Peter,
Well, I can't send you mine, because if I do, you'll have a photograph of a drooly, dirty little boy sitting on the wall, and that's me, and it isn't good for my image.
Well, you know what? We won't tell you who it is.
I'll Photoshop
We can Photoshop you out. That's right. They have these new Google things where you can take the people out.
Peter,
Okay. I'll see what I can find.
Peter, it's Paul for a second. I don't know if you've walked by my house lately, but there's been some beach erosion, and there's a wooden structure that appears to be in front of my house and the neighbor west of me. I
saw it the other day.
Is that what remains as part of the old bulk?
No, the bulkhead was parallel to the shore.
Were.
But what there were jetties, wooden jetties down.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a remainder of
the jetty.
Of a jetty.
Yes. There were a lot of them along the beach that predated the groin, and most of them are buried, but periodically, like yours, it surfaced. If you go from your house toward Penfield, there are 2 or 3 of them that have surfaced maybe halfway from your house to Penfield, and coincidentally, that's an area that's washed out a lot, just like on your side of the groin, which might reverse next year.
Yeah.
Can you get a picture of those?
Get a picture of the wooden ones
right now.
Let's actually put that in.
Okay.
And I've got some down near me too.
Sure. Okay.
All right, well, I do think we should jump on this within the next week or two, if we can, just because I think once they start writing the report, it puts us in a awkward position
Don't they
trying
have
to
a review
undo
before
it.
they finish the report?
What's that?
Don't most reports have a review period or something like that?
I don't know, I don't know if we'll be
But I
invited
think
to
Becky's
it.
right. I think she's very smart to bring that up, that we should feed the information in now.
Yeah, so they write the report with that knowledge.
They can't say they didn't know about it. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to move on to the last item of business, which is any new business. And the only thing I have is I sent out a draft of a newsletter that I would like to send out.
Very good.
If anyone has any comments on that newsletter, I'd be happy to take them.
That was excellent.
But I'd like to get this out sooner rather than later. The intent would be to do a newsletter, probably not once a month. I think you don't need it that often, but maybe once every 2 months.
Right.
Quarterly.
Or quarterly.
I would just suggest maybe a little blurb about the Rooster River flood control project.
I can add.
Mainly because we do want to reach out to the upland people also, with this.
Maybe that'd be the next newsletter.
Well, I was going to do the next newsletter. I wanted to do Rooster River and marshes. So I was going to this was sort of hurricane and hurricane preparedness, and I'm always going to have a Penfield. So we have 103 people so far signed up for it.
I was thinking always have a Rooster River, because that's an active project that's doing something slowly, but it's doing something.
Well, maybe what I'll do is, why don't I add...
Penfield's an active project, Rooster River's an active project. What other active projects do we have? Tidegate analysis?
Maybe I should do a one-liner on all the active projects as just a section in this.
We have the active project of the Riverside Drive tide gates too. That's been approved now by the RTM.
Yeah.
$7.5 million worth.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's active.
So I'll do a section on sort of active projects, and what we'll do is do deeper dives on each one as we do each quarter. We'll do sort of a deep dive. Like I'd love to do the tide gate and marshes, why marshes are important to mitigating sea level rise and impacting. So I will do that. I will add that and then send this one out as our first inaugural newsletter. And I talked to Mike Ginley about trying to get the whole Pine Creek Association on this, because
there is no Creek Association.
But there's sort of a mailing list that he does, right?
We haven't had a meeting in 5 years.
Well, yeah, but
But you have a list of
we
people.
just
We
want a
need-
mailing list. We don't care about having
We
meetings.
just want emails.
Yeah, we want a mailing list.
I don't even talk to them anymore.
All right, well, there's a list of people, and what he's willing to do is the next time he sends out an update to his email list, he's gonna say, if you'd like to sign up for the flood and erosion
That's good,
control
that's good.
newsletter, go to this place and sign up. So.
Okay.
All right, any other items that anyone wants to bring up?
What do you, that approach of signing up for the newsletter, I sent you the list of the people who came to the Rooster River meetings, 3 years ago now? Are you just gonna send them the first newsletter?
I'm tempted to send them the newsletter and then just have them unsubscribe if they don't want it. As opposed, I mean, technically according to MailChimp, you're supposed to have received permission. And what I did is I actually I don't know if any of you guys get the Fairfield Beach residents newsletter.
Yeah, I responded.
A lot of people, that's where I got most of my signups.
Okay.
A lot of people said, I'd like to get this, yes, I'd like to get this, yes, I'd like to get this. So those most of the 103 have all been people who have said.
Maybe take that Rooster River list, well, there are 44 people on there, I think, or
Yeah.
something like that. Just send them an email. We're starting this newsletter. and
Would you like to be?
The
Yes,
Rooster River
please.
is
Yeah,
one
maybe
of
I'll do that.
our topics that's in our project list, and it's moving along but slowly. Would you like to sign on?
And maybe, I think
Get
I
their
might even have an
permission.
old email from Mike Kinley too, that has all the Pine Creek people on it who who wanted to know about the dredging. I could do the same thing for them.
Yeah, why not?
Good.
All right,
Then you'll be legal as far as MailChimp goes.
yes, I don't wanna send things to people who don't
No,
want them.
no, that's true.
All right, well then, I would then consider the meeting adjourned.
Whoa.
Oh.
Chris Dow. So I went to look for his thing and it's too big or something.
Yeah, I asked him to resend it,
Okay, so,
yeah.
and this is Chris Dow. Chris Dow was an intern who did a project looking at all the properties that are in the floodplain and something or other, which it didn't turn out the way Becky was anticipating, but it is something. So I'd like to just look at it and see whether there's any
Well, he didn't
serendipity
actually,
there.
so he was supposed to create a complete analysis of all of the parcels and houses that are elevated and those that are not. And then we could put a valuation number on those and know what value is it of people who have not raised their houses and what value is it that have. He, because he ran out of time, did maybe a quarter at best of that project. He was willing to keep working on it, so I was gonna reach out to him and just say, what would he charge us to finish it? And if it's only, $500, I'll just pay for that, because I think we need that. So I'm gonna.
Oh, if it's $2,000, go to Brenda and say, Brenda, we need this information. We need to slice and dice. You don't have enough people on your various staffs to slice.
You can't even write the RFPs, so.
Yeah, you people write RFPs.
All right, so, so to answer your question, he never finished it, so it really is not a helpful analysis at this point, because he didn't do what he needed to do. But if it's finished, it would actually be very helpful, so that's what I would like to get it finished. All right,
Okay.
so thank you all. I am now calling the meeting of the Flood and Erosion Control Board of June closed at 7.
Okay.
Oh, 8.
Most to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn. All right, it is now adjourned.
Okay.
Then I will stop the recording.